Uh, Here in Iowa, the weather's getting colder. We had quite a cold snap, and oftentimes when that happens, our bodies change as well. So I know mine sure does, and I find that I have to be a lot more compassionate to my own body when the weather gets shifts suddenly like it has. So I just want to wish you all well, and may your bodies be well, may your minds be well, may your spirits be well, and may all beings be well. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about the Tenzo Kyokun, the instructions to the cook. This is a theme we've had for the past couple of months. It's a theme that's very close to my own practice, as I spent a lot of time. I'm by no means an expert cook or even necessarily a good cook, but I spent a lot of time in the kitchen reflecting on some of the teachings within the Tenzo Kyokun. And I've just found them so invaluable for understanding how we practice when we're not sitting on the cushion. And the kitchen, everybody, no matter what we've been doing, whether we've had a chance to meditate or not, the kitchen is a place to practice. It's a place to practice if we're eating. It's a place to practice if we are cooking. And so Zen doesn't let us easily get off the hook of practice. In other words, we can't just say, I haven't been practicing. And often when we say that, we're often referring to what? We're referring to Zazen, we're referring to meditation. I haven't been practicing. That doesn't get you off the hook. Practice is every single moment. And so when we're in the kitchen, who of us isn't in the kitchen at least once or twice a day? When we're in the kitchen, we have opportunities to practice so many times. And the Tenzo Kyokun gives us a broad picture of practice in the kitchen, as well as going into the minutia, the tiny aspects of practice. We get the big aspects and the small aspects. And today I'd like to talk about one of the minutia, the small aspects of practice. The title of this talk is Carefully Clean or Wash the Food and Waste Nothing. Dogen Zenji writes, to wash the rice properly, carefully watch with clear eyes that not one grain is wasted. Then put it in a pot, light the fire, and steam the rice. I just love Zen teachings. This is a teaching on enlightenment. How do we practice enlightenment in the minutia of our lives? And it just, the clarity of instructions is so present in this sentence. To wash the rice properly. In other words, pay attention to what you're doing with the food. Be aware you are washing. I don't care if it's rice or vegetables, whatever it is that you're cooking, you have to clean. You have to clean, make sure it's clean, right? Wash the rice properly. What does that mean, properly? Well, make sure that there's no bugs. If there's bugs in it, there's no dirt, right? That it's cleaned. Carefully watch with clear eyes that not one grain is wasted. Not one grain is wasted. Wow. Think about that. Not one grain. Think about the hundreds, if you're, those of you familiar with preparing rice, how many grains of rice might be present for 5 or 6 bowls full of rice? Maybe a few thousand? out of a few thousand, not one grain of rice, Dogen Zenji says, to be wasted. Then, here's a very important part. Put it in a pot, right? What do I do with the rice? We just take it for granted. We're going to put it in a pot. But this is part of the instructions. Notice which pot you're putting it in. Is it the right size? Is it the right material? Light the fire, right? This is 800, 900 years ago. I mean, still we light fires in their pots, but sometimes not. Light the fire, turn on the electric element or put the gas on. That's a fire. But in the olden days, they would have never dreamed of having gas fires or electric fires under their pot. They had to collect wood, and they had to burn the wood, and they had to collect the exact right amount, or they had to at least get the right amount of wood in the stove so it would get to the right temperature. That all requires a tremendous amount of mindful attention. How much wood are you going to use to create the right amount of heat so that the water in that pot boils correctly and doesn't overflow? Light the fire and steam the rice. And now here's one more line. It says, an ancient said, right? In an ancient, we don't know who the ancient is, but presumably a Zen master, he said, when steaming rice, regard the pot as your own head. When washing rice, know that the water is your own life. All right, so there's just so much here, and I'd like to focus on 4 different parts of this. I want to share a story of cooking rice at Mount Equity Zendo, where I trained. I want to talk about the use of water. I want to talk about the epic degree of food waste and water waste in our food industry. And lastly, I want to talk about this idea that water is life. So those are the parts of this that I want to focus on, these 4 things. So first of all, the story, a personal story, when I was asked to cook at Mount Equity Zendo, and keep in mind, I have an Italian, my mother's Italian background, and so it wasn't, I don't know, maybe in some Italian households rice was a thing, but in ours it definitely wasn't, and certainly not short grain brown rice that was largely cooked in Japan. So I was very, very intimidated by the process of cooking rice. And my teacher gave me a pot rice. She showed me how to wash the rice in the bowl and pouring out the water and then refilling it, getting it to the right amount. And once I did, we turned the heat on the stove. And again, following these instructions to the T. And again, because I was very, very intimidated by the whole process of cooking. I didn't do much cooking, hardly any, maybe not even any cooking when I was growing up in my own home. Consequently, I didn't know how to cook rice, or even, maybe I could cook pasta. I could boil some water and throw some pasta in there. That was familiar to me. But rice and getting the exact amount of water, I never really paid attention to how much water you'd actually need to cook something. I just filled it up willy-nilly. But rice, it's an exact science, and it's generally 2 cups of water to 1 cup of brown rice. That's a general measurement there. So measuring that out just right was so foreign to me. But I learned so much in that process of doing that, getting just the right amount of water to rice, so that the rice grains would fill up to the proper amount for eating. So the rice would be soft, not crunchy, right? And not too much water, because if you put too much water in, then the rice gets mushy and it doesn't hold its shape. So getting the right amount of water in with the rice is absolutely crucial. Then the second part was the heat, how much heat to use. And I'm really forever grateful to my teacher for sharing with me, right there, right side by side in the kitchen next to the stove, she said, okay, don't take the lid off of the pot. Don't take that lid off of the pot, because if you do, the steam will escape. It won't go into the rice. And the lid, she would say, is like your mindfulness. If the lid's not there, then the steam goes out and it doesn't do its job. And in the same way, mindfulness acts like a kind of lid. It helps when we're really bringing that kind of non-judgmental awareness to what we're doing. We're cooking something. I don't mean cooking in terms just of food, but our koan, our genjo. In Soto Zen, we talk about the genjo koan. We all have a koan. In Soto Zen, I don't give people koans to study. You already have your own koan. It's called your life. Each of us has a koan to master in this lifetime. I'm not going to give you your koan. That's preposterous. What I can do, though, is direct you to looking at your own koan. It's your question about what is your life about, not what I want your life to be about, but what's your life about? What's your question? Right? And Zen, the question is extraordinarily important. If you don't have a question, practice doesn't really take. You got to have a question. And we all do. It's just a matter of looking for it. It might be as simple as, I don't get along with my spouse on certain days, or when she says or he says certain things. That's a koan right there. That's your life. That's maybe not an overall life koan, but it's a koan of that moment. And it's connected to the bigger question of, what's my life about? Why am I here? What am I here to do? So mindfulness brings that question to the fore and has us look at it. Whatever going on in our life, we don't have to resolve. We don't have to resolve our question. See, that's the thing, is that we think we could answer every question that comes along. Just look it up on the internet and you'll find the answer. What if I were to tell you it's okay to have a question, right? If you don't have a question, you don't have mindfulness. If you already know the answers to everything, you don't have any mindfulness present. You're so aware of everything, you don't need mindfulness. You don't even need practice. Right? So we have to if you're here, you've got to bring your question to the fore. I don't need to know what your question is unless you want to share it with me. But you don't need to, you need to look at it and bring it forward, right? What's your question? And then we bring mindfulness to that so that we don't answer it immediately, right? That's the important thing. All right. So she had me look at the lid of the pot with my ears. She said, put your ear down to the pot lid and listen. Listen to the rice. Listen to when it comes to a boil, because then you're going to have to turn down the heat. You're going to have to turn the heat down. You don't want the water to boil over the pot. That's no good, right? And this process, so I listened really carefully, and I could barely hear anything, but I kind of got a sense of the rice was boiling, and she said, okay, turn it down now, turn down the heat. Now, if you're using an electric stove, then you've got to turn down the heat sooner than it boils because of the residual heat. And this echoes back to this idea of not wasting a thing. Don't waste heat. Turn it down before it, especially if you have electric heat, turn it down. Right? Otherwise, you're wasting heat, and what happens? The water boils over, and then you waste water and rice too. All right, so I'm listening to okay, turn it down, okay, turn down the heat and let it simmer, right? Dogen Zenji says, steam, let the rice steam, let the pot of water simmer, right? And then you let that simmer for a certain amount of time, and then you turn it off. You don't want to keep it cooking for too long, right? And you don't want to keep it cooking because it will burn, and you don't want to keep it cooking for too short. Otherwise, it won't be properly cooked. It won't be soft. And this is what we do with our koan, too. This is what we do when we sit on the cushion in zazen. We might initially have to bring some effort to our practice of meditation, right? It might take us some effort, extra effort to just get to the cushion. That's turning up the heat. That's bringing yourself to a boil. But once you're there, you got to turn down the heat, right? We've got to learn how to turn the heat down, put it on low, and let it simmer. I mean this figuratively and literally. Because I remember another part of the story that I'm telling has to do with one day I was cooking rice, and it was also time for zazen. So I put the rice on the pot, did what my teacher said, turn it down, and you're supposed to let it simmer for about 20 to 30 minutes or so. It was just the right amount of time because I was going to go sit zazen and then come back and turn it off. I had just the right amount of time there. So that's what I did. I brought the rice to a boil, lowered the heat, put it on simmer, then went to sit zazen, and lo and behold, I could connect with what that ancient master said. When steaming rice, regard the pot as your own head. What was happening? I was feeling like I was inside of that pot. I felt like I was inside of that pot, boiling and simmering. And it wasn't a bad thing at all. Right? I wasn't getting boiled. I was cooking. Right? In Zazen, we cook ourselves. It's no coincidence that Uchiyama Kosho Roshi's book on the Tenzo Kyokun is called something like Cooking Your Life, right? That's our job in Zazen. In Zen practice, what we're doing is becoming very close to whatever it is we're doing with our hands, so much so that we become one with it. In a very literal way, we become one with the cooking. And that's ideal. I'm not always having experiences like that, but that really hit me, and it made me realize how close we are to our food and to the process, but we have to give our attention fully to what we're doing. So I was sitting zazen, and I had this experience. Wow, I'm in that pot cooking. I could feel it in my own body-mind complex, right? And incidentally, the Chinese character for qi, or in Japanese, ki, translated as energy, or in the yogic tradition, they talk about prana, the prana of the body-mind. And chi is pervading the entire universe. It's a fascinating concept to think about. And we're generating chi or ki when we sit zazen and when we're practicing, when we're waking up to our life, we're generating that ki. The Chinese character for ki or chi is a simple grain of rice, the character for rice, within a pot with steam coming out of the pot. So I think these ancients, not just the Zen master, but probably the common populace, understood intuitively qi when they connected it with rice steaming in a pot of water. This sense of energy, of life. So that's the story. And I just share that one to you to encourage you to look closely at what you're doing and notice the intimate connection you have with whatever you do with your 5 fingers or 10 fingers, right? Whatever you're doing with your hands, you're going to have an impact. You're going to feel what you do externally. What you're doing out there becomes part of you. in a very literal sense. And I've had this experience on multiple occasions within training practice. I had this experience also washing laundry when I was at Tassajara for for a practice period. I was washing the laundry, and everything there had to be done by hand. There was no washing machine or dryer, so I had to soap up the water and then use my hands and rub the laundry together and get it clean, and then wring it out with my hands, with my arms. They had this wringer that you had to crank it through, and you could get a lot of the water out of the laundry. And then you had to find a space to hang up the laundry. And I swear, a couple hours after I went on a hike in the wilderness there of Tassajara, and I realized that it wasn't just my body that was feeling so fresh and clean, but the laundry itself. I knew that laundry was getting the sunshine on it and it was drying up. So we have these experiences and they're wonderful. And I just want to encourage you to use your own hands. Anytime we put distance between ourselves and what we're doing, we're losing out on that intimate experience, right? I don't begrudge anybody going out for a meal, but there's a sharp disconnection there often between you and the food you're eating when you go to a restaurant to eat. I go to restaurants at times to eat, right? We ordered out pizza the other night. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do those things. I'm just saying there's a bigger price than just the $20 you pay for your meal or your pizza, whatever. There's a bigger price we're paying, right? And so to really encourage using these 10 fingers and becoming intimate with what you're doing. Okay, number 2, the use of H2O, water. How much water do you need versus how much water do you use? Right? This is an important question, and it's related to that question about the rice and how much water to put in it. But if Dogen Zenji is saying don't waste water, water is your life. Wow, we gotta pay attention to this as a point of our Zen practice. Keep in mind we sometimes mistake the North Star for the destination. Right? The North Star is a point of orientation. It is not the destination. We're not trying to get to the North Star. Rather, the North Star leads us to where we want to go. And the Shingi, the Tenzo Kyokun Shingi, is like a North Star. It's helping us to orient, right? So I don't want anybody to walk away from this saying, oh, I waste too much water. Chances are you probably do waste too much water. But I'm not here to shame people for wasting water. That would go in the opposite direction of what we need to go into. I'm just orienting, right? The Shingi orients us when it says do not waste water. We need to look at that, right? And see how much water are we actually using and how much water do we actually need? And if there's a discrepancy there, well, let's consider bringing those two closer together. As the Buddha says in the Dhammapada, he says, the bee takes just the right amount of pollen without destroying the flower. And as human beings, this is absolutely essential for our own practice. Take what's needed, not more, not less. Right? There's a story, and why should we do that? Why should we do that? Why should we not waste? I mean, there's a whole slew of reasons why. I want to share a story. This is in the Blue Cliff record, case 19. It's entitled Fingertip Zen. And this is from the introduction to that koan case. When a single particle is picked up, the whole earth is contained in it. When a single blossom flowers, the whole world begins. Right? When a single particle is picked up, the whole earth is contained in it. When a single blossom flowers, the whole world begins. This is straightforward Zen teaching, that in every instance and in every speck of dust is the entire universe. Very hard to get our minds wrapped around this kind of thinking, but it's really, really central to Zen. And it's part of the reason why we say don't waste even one grain of rice, because in that grain of rice is the entire universe. You wouldn't throw out the entire universe, would you? Right? In one grain is the entire universe. But the story is of Gute, Master Gute. He would go around, his teaching, Zen Master Gute's teaching was, anytime anybody asked him about the Dharma, what would he do? He'd hold up one finger. And people would be baffled, like, what does this mean? Right? That was his teaching. He didn't say a word. He'd just hold up a finger. And either he assumed that the person he was speaking to was adept enough in his practice to understand this, that in the one is the all. Or he had that much trust and faith in the practitioner that if they didn't understand this, that they would eventually get it, because they could continue to look deeply and keep that koan in their mind. But that's what it's about. The one finger represents, what is Zen? Right? Just holding up a finger. I don't mean for us to hold up our fingers, but we have to look, in the one is the all. So a grain of rice or a drop of water is like Gute's one finger. And just as Gute keeps his mouth closed and just holds up a finger, the rice isn't going to speak to us, telling us that, hey, within me is the entire universe. But it is up to us to intuit that the whole universe is in the rice grain. All right. Many years ago, there was when I was at Mount Equity Zendo, a young Japanese woman came to the temple, and she was she was grieving so heavily because she had just lost her husband, and they had only been married maybe I think a year or two at that point, and my teacher was away, and I was asked to do the funeral service for this young woman, and I thought, geez, how can I help her out in this? And I remembered something called the Hoberman sphere that I learned from Fujita Isho Roshi. He was another Zen teacher that came to Mount Equity to teach us, Japanese teacher. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Hoberman sphere, but any place on the sphere that you pull, it expands the whole of the sphere. So it doesn't matter where you pull, whatever point you pull on it, the entire thing moves. And I shared this teaching with this young woman. I said, when someone is born, the entire universe is born. When someone dies, the whole universe dies. And somehow that really spoke to her because it calmed her way down. Right? But if we really take this teaching to heart, that everything, that there's no separation between us and the entire universe. When we die, the entire universe dies. Does that mean it's not going to be around anymore? And no, you're thinking too much if you're going in that direction. Just know that when you die, the entire universe dies with you. When you're born, the entire universe is born with you. Think about this. And then how we can apply it in our daily life. Right? One of the ways we can apply this is to really appreciate the food that we've been given, and that this food is the entire universe. In fact, we say this food is a gift of the whole universe. When we put our palms together, that's what we're saying at the start of a meal. This food is a gift of the whole universe, the earth, the sky, and much hard and loving work. May we live in a way that makes us worthy to receive it. All right, so this is to get us to begin thinking about our use of water. The third thing, the epic waste of food and water in our food industry. I already began touching on this waste. I want to go into it now. My third point is to go into that a little bit deeper, right? So last week I asked my DMAC students, Des Moines Area Community College, they're taking my world religions class, and we're talking about how sometimes we're talking about the teachings in the Bhagavad Gita and the difficulty it is in stepping into your own duty completely, or your own job in life, your own work in the world completely. And for a person like Arjuna, if you don't know the story, he's in this war, and he's a warrior, but he doesn't want to fight. He's lost heart because he has to do things that he doesn't want to do. And the story is really about our own life, where we are continually in a situation where we have to do things that we don't want to do. And so I asked the students if they, what their jobs were, and if there were things about their jobs that they didn't want to do. Well, it turned out that in one of my classes, almost all of the students were working in the food industry. Almost all of the students were working in the food industry. And I asked them, how much, do you witness a lot of waste of food? All of them nodded their heads. They were like, yeah, we waste a lot of food. Whether you're working at a restaurant, whether you're working at a grocery store, the amount of food that just gets thrown away or just doesn't get consumed. And meanwhile, there's so, the disparity in wealth. There's no reason for people to be going hungry when there's so much food around. So what do we do? What do we do? So we can give it away, right? Maybe we can't control what a restaurant does with their food. We can't control what a grocery store does with their food. But we can certainly take stock of our own kitchens and look at how we ourselves are contributing to food waste in our own culture, and start to develop an ethic of not wasting, an ethos of not wasting food, and start getting creative with abundance. If there's abundance, well, what do we do? I mean, maybe the most easy thing to do is put it in the freezer. You could also give it away, right? There's food pantries. There's food pantries here in Iowa and Nebraska. In fact, there's right now we know that the food credits are being diminished, and the government is pulling back funds. Well, this is an emergency situation. Some people will not have food. They depend on that government assistance for food. So we have this opportunity right now. In fact, we're in the process of setting something up at Nebraska Zen Center to help out with it, where you can donate food and then take it to the food bank so that people have food. Right? So think about food and how much you have, if you have abundance that's just not getting used, or that will go bad because you don't have enough mouths to feed. Well, there's plenty of mouths elsewhere that could use that food. And if it does end up going bad, well, maybe if you have a little land, you can compost that food too. So at least it doesn't go into the garbage system to create. See, what the problem is that if we just throw away our food that's not eaten, well, the problem is that food creates methane gas when it gets put into a kind of a municipal garbage heap. That the gases that the food gives off in its decomposition process get trapped, and that trapped gas turns into methane gas. It's a huge problem. If you compost the food yourself in your own garden, or just dig away a little bit near the roots or the base of a tree or a bush and put the compost down there, it will return back to the soil, no problem. You'll be nourishing the land that you have to take care of, to steward in composting your food. But also think about how much you purchase on the front end, right? How much do you need? And how do we have to buy as much as we do? right? So thinking on the front end too, so that we're not wasting any of the food that we're purchasing, but getting the exact right amount. And this is important, especially sesshin when we're doing retreats. I'm thinking like, how many people are eating? How much food should I make so that we make the exact proper amount? You know, and generally speaking, it's better to err on having a little bit too much food because that helps people feel like, okay, the anxiety doesn't arise like it would if we don't have enough food. So it's generally a good practice to err on having maybe one or two extra servings of food um, when we're cooking for a larger group of people. But in your own families too, you can think about this. Maybe you make leftovers that you have for a different meal later on in the day or something. You guys get creative. We can get creative. I guess the point is that we need to pay attention to amounts, right? Okay, and then the last thing I'd like to share is this saying, water is life. Um, a few years ago, maybe some of you are aware of this, that the Lakota people were um, protesting the Dakota Access Pipeline because they were seeing that pipeline, an oil company wanted to put a pipeline directly through or very close to a water reservoir on the Lakota lands and through the reservation. And so they were protesting it. And a lot of people around the country joined in on those protests. But this is the ethos that we have in our country where we don't see the need for protecting water sources. Big organizations don't see the need for protecting water resources. And so they won't think twice about putting something like an oil pipeline close to a reservoir. If it spills, there goes the water, right? So this is of concern. So what can we do? Well, I don't begrudge anybody protesting, and that might be one thing that we can do. However, I think we need to also start looking at our own households and how we treat water that comes through and that we use in our own hands. The water that we use not just to wash the food and to cook food in, but the water that we use to wash our hands, the water that we use to wash our bodies, the water that we use to water plants and things on our land. You know, water usage is something that we can think of in our own households. And one of the things I was really impressed by when I went to Japan and trained is that they told us to use what's called pencil water when we turn the water on to wash our hands. It was just such a simple and beautiful teaching of you turn on the spigot so much so that a small pencil thin stream of water is coming out of the faucet. A small pencil thin stream of water is coming out of the faucet. This is a difficult practice for me even today. And I encourage you guys to think about that, pencil water. So that when you're washing your hand, a lot of times people will just turn on the faucet full blast and this gush of water coming out. What if you were to restrict the flow of water, so just a small bit, the thickness of a pencil coming out of and using that stream to wash your hands? How much water would you save just doing that, right? Or when you're brushing your teeth. Oftentimes when people brush their teeth, they just turn on the spigot full blast and they're brushing their teeth and the water's just going right down the drain. Water is life, right? Water is life. That's our life going down the drain. So what we're doing here, what this Shingi is teaching us, is to pay attention. Pay attention to what you're doing. It's not just about sitting on a cushion peacefully and calmly. It has connections to outside of the cushion. And we can start to think about those connections. And we can think about our own kitchen, what we're doing in the kitchen as religious practice, as spiritual practice. Right? This is all in the realm, and these are things that we can begin to control. So I hope people don't lose hope or feel shame about any of this, but that it encourages you to think about how you can be more mindful, how you can bring what Uchiyama Kosho Roshi says, enlightenment in the kitchen, right? So that's practice. That's practice. Any moment is practice. Every moment is practice. And certainly when we're in the kitchen, that's an excellent place to practice. Okay, that's the shingi that I'd like to share about this particular aspect of the Tenzo Kyokun at this time. Thank you so much for listening. And if anybody has any questions to share, please, we have a few minutes here. We got about 6 minutes. Or comments, any comments people want to make.
Yeah, Daishin, yeah, thank you. It reminds me of the kitchen altar we have here at Zen Center, the calligraphy you did for it, which is C1 no 10, which is what you just talked about now. You see one grain of rice, you see the whole universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
that's a good reminder to have that, even though it's calligraphy, we don't really know exactly what it says, but it's C1 no 10 is what it's
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's encouragement there to keep that in mind. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, George. Appreciate it.
I guess I have a question or a thought. I definitely see the value in trying to be really mindful about your own water usage and food usage and environmental impact and all of that. And then I also sometimes struggle with the reality that okay, even if I'm as maximally efficient over the course of my lifetime as I possibly can be, uh, just knowing that the vast majority of water waste and food waste does come from really big organizations, and that is individual efforts are not going to be enough to do what we need to do. It's hard to hold both those truths in my head at the same time.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. It's not enough, right? But it's a start. And right now in our country, it's very easy to waste. Our country makes it extraordinarily easy to waste. It's very, very difficult to not waste. But the thing to keep in mind is that nobody wants to waste. We do. We're set up in a system where it's very wasteful system. Nobody wants to waste. I mean, the students in my DMAC class, they didn't like the fact that they had to throw away all kinds of food, and yet they're caught in a system where that's the reality of the situation. So yeah, it's both, and it's both. We play our part, and I think on an individual level, we have to learn to create an ethos in our families of water usage and food usage. This is not easy, and we don't want to I mean, there's the old people used to shame their kids for not eating and wasting the food and saying there's people hungry, so and so, you should eat your food. We don't need to go in that direction. I think that's another extreme. But to create an ethos where it becomes natural to think about how we use the water and to appreciate the food and the water in a way such that it's our own life. All right, that's a mental shift for, I think, all of us. And we also need to hold larger organizations accountable too. Um, so it's got to be a both and thing. And so if you have some pull towards these larger organizations, I mean, one of the things that Jisho, my partner, my wife, she connected with a grocery store, a local grocery store that happens to be a co-op for us. She connected with them. She wrote them and said, you guys use a lot of plastic. You guys use a lot of plastic can you consider using glass? And the grocery store actually started selling yogurt in glass jars because of that request of hers, you know. So, you know, again, each of us are called to do something. And I'm not saying that everybody has to, you know, engage with larger entities, but I do want people to take seriously your own calling and where you feel you have a particular responsibility, and to not shirk that responsibility, whatever it might be. This is your koan, right? So it's not, I don't encourage, I'm not saying that all of us should um, do something together and protest this. That's not what I'm saying. If that's what everybody wants to do, that's a different story. But we each individually have our own set, we have our purpose here, why we're here, and we need to take that seriously, whatever it is. And maybe we can't control what a larger organization is doing, but we can have influence in our families. I mean, my mother's here right now, and I've been talking with her about this. You know, she came from Maryland, and she sees how we live, and compared to, and she's, you know, thinking about how she lives, and talking about how the environmental crisis is at heart a spiritual crisis. So these are just, I'm just putting out ideas here, but the key is also to not lose hope. And this is really hard in our times too. And this is one of the central messages of the Bhagavad Gita, which is also part of the Zen tradition. The message, that is, of doing action without concern for the fruits of action, right? The Bhagavad Gita says this explicitly, but I think it's in all religious traditions. It's to do your action, do your duty, do your calling without without attachment to the results, right? And this is a very hard thing for us to get behind, because we want to see results and we want to see them immediately. And that harkens back to our society too, that wants to see immediate results on everything. We purchase something, we get it immediately, almost the same day in the mail, right? And so more and more we have lower and lower patience for not getting what we want. This is also part of practice, to have that patience, to develop patience. It's okay not to see the results. And especially when we're talking about environmental issues, we do the best we can, and we're not going to see the results in our lifetime, because this is an issue that's ongoing. We don't know. We don't know how it will pan out at this point. But we can't base our present actions on the results that they yield within our lifetime. I guess that's my point. But I think it's a very fair question. I'm really grateful that you asked it, and I hope this will be recorded as well, so that other people can hear that response. Hey, Max.
Daishin, thank you for your talk. I want to offer two quick thoughts. One, I appreciated you sharing about sitting zazen while the rice was cooking. I know even just a year ago, like taking a minute to warm up a bottle of milk for my daughter in the microwave, it's easy to like try to use that minute for something else, but even just like standing there and listening to the microwave running, hands in gasho, not worrying about it for a moment, that sort of stopping can bring a real sense of peace and connection to what you're doing there. So I definitely resonated with that. As far as this connection, like trying to bridge the gap between the larger social thing and our own personal use, I just wanted to shout out a group I think that does really good work with that. It's called Food Not Bombs, because a lot of like grocery stores will toss out food that is getting close to its expiration date, too close to sell, but it's still good to eat. They'll take in donations of that sort of food and prepare fresh vegetarian meals to give out in public spaces for free to whoever shows up. There's a chapter in every state. I believe there's one in Omaha. I think there's one in Des Moines. So just that, even as a model of something we can do, I think I take a lot of inspiration from that, even though I'm not actively involved myself. So,
Great, great. That's beautiful. The beautiful resources. I hope these get recorded too. Yeah, included in this recording. That's fantastic. So food, not bombs. Yeah, great, great. Thanks for that. Well, we are at our time here. I want to give chance um, for others to talk, but I do want to share that if you want to have a dokusan with me, at some point, feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, either directly about this particular talk, or you just want to talk, have a conversation with me. We call it Dokusan. And I really want to invite you and encourage everybody to do Dokusan with me. I can do it online at any time during the month, and I really want you to. I've been available to do that throughout my tenure here at Nebraska Zen Center. So I hope you guys will take me up on that, because it's so important to have that one-on-one connection with a teacher and go over your practice. It can really help to give it a boost. At least that's my hope in doing that and being present and available for people. So just consider that as we part for today. And thank you so much for your practice.